Welcome to the Wildcast, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Calvin Coyles, and I am joined by the incredible Justin Bryan, who is a transformational life coach, a speaker, and has had a tremendous journey through self-discovery, personal development, dealing with mental health, suicide, addiction, and going through that process of transforming himself and really rebuilding himself. And I'm so excited to check in with him because in the world that we live in today, there are so many people that are struggling every day with mental health. And we see a full spectrum of this through our work, and we've obviously got an incredible team of people even in our offices. We experience mental health, and we obviously are dealing with clients every day that are dealing with those problems and challenges. And it's very rare that you get to see somebody like Justin, who has been through the shit and has been able to come out on the other side, and now is actually doing more than just going, yeah, cool, I've been through it, but now I'm actually teaching and inspiring other people to how to do the same thing as well. So I think there's going to be a tremendous number of lessons to learn. We already had a brief chat before we came on the podcast today, and I feel like we've already had a podcast before we even got on here as well. So we'll probably be able to chuck some of those outtakes into the show notes. But Justin, thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate it so much. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Hey, you know what? Thank you so much for having me on the show. And that introduction was perfect. It was bang on, and I appreciate what saying what I came over and that what I've done, and it was hard, right? Because like you said,
Yeah.
I was in that darkness for many years, 16 years. So.
Yeah, wow. And I was watching some of the stuff that you had. I checked out your website, obviously, in prep for the show, and some of the stuff on social. And something grabbed me, which was that, we normally like to start by looking at your journey and your story, right? How you became a coach. I think that's even more prevalent for you because we say people a lot of times in coaching will turn their pain into their purpose. And I think you're a great example of that. Someone that has been through that. I read on your website, though, that I think you were depressed or suicidal from like 6 years old. Is that right? And when did that start for you? And then how, that 16 years, most people, let's be honest, just don't survive that 16 years. So what do you feel were some of the things that kept you going during that time? Tell me how you came to effectively be a coach and get into this world.
Yeah, well, I was an addict for 16 years from drugs, started with alcohol, and then I like to tell people I graduated almost into drug use, right? But for 6 straight years, I was suicidal every single day, wondering, am I going to make it? Is this going to be the day? What am I going to write? How am I going to do it? But from what I've learned about mental health and depression and anxiety, I look back on it now and I can see that when I was a kid, I always compared myself to other people. I had low self-esteem. I had low self-worth. I had low self-confidence. I always wanted to be somebody else but me. I didn't have a bad life, though. I mean, I was smaller than most of my friends. And I was an athletic kid growing up, but most of my friends were ahead of me. And, I just wanted to be them, and I wanted to catch up to them. And for some reason, I compared myself to people, and I wanted to be them. Now that kind of just transferred from high school, or from junior high to high school to real life when I graduated. And I think around 19, I moved away for hockey, and then I really started drinking. And because I didn't really drink in high school, I had drank a handful of times, but I wasn't a party animal. I wasn't against drinking. I didn't want to drink. I didn't need to drink, but I always acted out. I always tried to be the funny man, just to get people to notice me, get people to like me. When I look back on it, I had people that liked me. I didn't need to do that, but it was such a self-hatred almost for myself that, I needed to do stuff like that. So when I got out of high school, I moved away for hockey, and I started drinking, pretty much like heavily. Went from 0 to 100, like almost to an alcoholic very quick, because as soon as I started drinking, I liked who it made me be. Right. So I liked the false confidence it gave me. I thought I was funnier, I would come out of my shell more, but then I started to rely on it. So I started to become, when I was 21, I moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and I started bartending downtown. Now, by that time, I was almost a full-blown alcoholic. Right. I was getting in trouble when I was playing hockey, even a very awful billet when I lived with my billet parents. I wasn't a very good dude. Like, I wasn't a bad guy, I want to hurt you person. It's just I was a sloppy alcoholic, and I made a lot of poor decisions growing up. So when I got to Vancouver, I'm living downtown and I'm a bartender. What am I going to do? I started going out every single night. I was drinking basically every single night. And then after I drink, I would go home and I would order a bottle. and basically drink a 2.6 of vodka, usually with 1 can of pop as a mix.
Wow.
So 26 ounces with 1 can of pop. And I'd start to have an algorithm of how much I wanted to drink. So I'd have this many drinks to leave my house. I'd have this many drinks to talk to that girl, this many drinks to go on the dance floor, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? Then I'd black out. Well, then I finally, at 24 years old, I was introduced to cocaine. And it was not like I was against it or judged people that did it. I'm like, this is not for me, right? And so at 24 years old, I finally did it. But then I blacked out that night. And the next day I just asked my buddy how the night went, and he looked at me and he said the worst things he could have said to me, which other people would be like, well, that's bad. Well, he looked at me, he's like, man, you were funny last night. So for me, that triggered that, oh, hey, you know what? I have alcohol to be funny. Now I have cocaine to be even funnier. So now I have these two vices.
Raising the stakes.
Yeah, that are just gonna make me super Justin, which I thought was super Justin. But by that time, I was always getting like blackout drunk, and like nobody really wanted to be around me in the beginning of the night. But
yeah,
no, it's I was sloppy. So at that point, one of the bartenders came up to me and that I was working with, and he's like, "Hey man, do you think you drink too much?" And I got defensive, and I'm like, man, you know what? I'm 24. I like to party. Yeah, I'm living in this big, beautiful, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Vancouver. It's crazy. And no, I got defensive. But what I should have looked at him, because he was an ex-alcoholic actually, right. And he told me a story, and I knew his story and why he didn't drink. So I should have took it to heart. That night, I started walking after the bar, or after I closed up the bar. I'm walking. I go out for my power half hour like I normally do. Power hour, get as drunk as I can, and I'm walking home. And I started to look up, and I'm like, man, am I an alcoholic? And I'm like, no. This is what I said. I'm like, I am too smart to be an alcoholic. I am not. I started correlating. This was 12 years ago. I'm 36 now. Alcoholism with being a low life, right? Or being not normal. And I took that not normal for way too far. Like, even when I quit drinking, for the longest time, I'm like, well, they can drink. I must not be the normal one. So here I'm thinking that this poison, like I still don't like judge anybody who drinks. Like, that's just, I shouldn't drink, right? That's why I don't. But I correlated it with being not normal for not being able to drink, right? And that's, I think a lot of addicts look at it as, well, they can handle it. Why can't I? Yes. I must not be normal. Yeah. Which is like, then we're putting alcohol or a substance on a pedestal. Yeah. And so at 24 years old, I'm putting it on a pedestal, right? Fast forward 6 months down the road, 24 years old. I'm driving down, I moved back home. I'm driving down the street stretch, and me and my buddy started having this topic of conversation of depression. We're talking about it, and that's when I looked at him, and I'm like, you know what, man? Depression is for the weak. It's an excuse. You got to man up. You got to go to work. You got to pay your bills. And, I don't know why I said it, but I do know why I said it is I never thought of myself as a man, and I really looked up to this guy, and, I wanted to show him that I was a man. But at 24 years old, I'm correlating alcoholism with being not normal, being a low life, and I'm too smart. Then I'm also correlating depression with being weak and excuse, and you got to man up. So 24 years old, my two major problems are addiction and depression. And I'm pushing them aside.
Yeah.
And I started right from 24, kind of I kept going down that downward spiral where, I almost didn't get my life back.
Wow. Fuck, that's insane. So that's you're 24. Was there a moment for you in that journey where you feel like was rock bottom, or was there several of those moments? Like you see in the movie, right? If you're watching the movie of Justin Bryan, you see him walking down the street arguing with himself. You see him driving in the car, and we're waiting for that sort of that moment where we see the potential in you, but you don't see it yet. We're waiting for that moment where everything changes, and then all of your friends come back, and you're looking for that Hollywood ending, right? Was it as simple as that? Was there a day where you said enough is enough, or was it a series of pieces? Like, I'm just interested to know, because I remember, just to give you a bit of a context, I remember having a conversation with a mentor of mine, Grant Cardone. I'm not sure if you know Grant. And I remember we did a podcast together actually, and he was talking about as a younger man, he was involved with drugs and drinking and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, he says that this guy comes to his house he owed him some money, I think, and he smacks him straight over the head with a gun, puts a gun to his head, smacks him in the head, busts up in his face. He ends up going into rehab, and he's like, at that moment, like his mum's like, you can't hang around anymore. He's like, that's the moment I should have stopped, and that could have been my turnaround time. He says, but I was back on the drugs and the drink again just a couple of days later. But he's like, it wasn't enough for me, right? So, what was the moment where things changed for you?
I almost have a similar story. So,
Right.
I come back home, and then I for a little bit, and then I move away again. Right. I was like a gypsy. I was moving around because I fell out of love with myself. Well, and you know what? I honestly don't even think I was ever in love with myself. That's the problem. And it's very important that you love yourself before you can love anybody else, because it's very hard to give your full self when you can't even give it to yourself.
Yeah.
Now, I move away, and I'm getting in trouble. I'm getting let go from jobs because I'm drinking. I'm doing drugs, and I was a very honest person. I tell the people at work, I'm like, hey, I'm drunk. Like, show up drunk. Like, and then I'd be like, hey man, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm drunk. And I get fired. And then I just, I moved back home. I moved back home. I went back to bartending again. But I met this girl, like this beautiful, smart girl. And, we started dating, but I couldn't put the bottle down. And she started to see like who I really was. And, I was a mess at that point. And then we ended up breaking up. I moved back home in with my parents. And then she came down, we hung out on my birthday, and then we actually hooked up. And then we kind of kept in touch, but didn't see each other until one day she's like, hey, I need to talk to you. So it's about 3 months later. So she comes down to my hometown, and we go for a drive, and she's like, listen, I'm pregnant. I was like, holy cow, man. And I'm thinking, I was like, how the hell am I going to bring a kid into my life? I can't even look after me. Like,
Wow.
I'm living in my parents' house. I'm 28 years old. I'm living in my parents' house. Or actually, I might have been 29 at that time. I'm living in my parents' house. I'm just a mess, right? I had to take a leave of absence from work because I got a job at the mill, and I kept missing work. So
Wow.
she tells me she's pregnant. So we get back together. She moves down, and I end up crashing a car when I'm under the influence. And I'm like, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to rehab. So at 6 months pregnant, I end up going to rehab. And the problem is that I went with the wrong reasons. So I went to kind of get out of, well, I thought I went with the right reasons, but I went to get out of town, right? I was embarrassed because, I'm in a town of 20,000 people. Everybody,
Everyone
and I work,
knows.
I
Yeah.
know a lot of people. I pretty much know everybody. Not everybody, but like a lot of people. And it happened right on the highway. And so everybody was texting me, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm embarrassed. I got to get out of town. I got to get better, right? Because I got a kid on the way. So I go to rehab. Now I'm in rehab with 60 other guys who just, some are out of jail, some are on assault charges, so they have to be there because they're under the influence. Everyone got their coping mechanisms taken away, so everybody has to be sober, right? And now you got 60 dudes living in one place. There's a lot of testosterone going around there. But the one thing I can say about rehab centers is that when you're there, that was the most normal I ever felt. I didn't feel normal around my friend because I was the black sheep. I was the guy that couldn't keep it together. And
Yeah.
that really weighed on me because in high school I was athletic. People liked me. I got good grades, and I didn't study. But I mean, I skipped a lot. I had no work ethic back then, and I was that black sheep. And then the guilt and shame started to
Wow.
creep in, and so I'm in rehab. I'm going to my classes. I'm eating 6 times a day really well. That's the good thing about the rehab centers. They feed you really good.
Yeah, great.
And I'm working out twice a day, and I gain some weight, like gain some muscle, and okay, I'm like, that's it. I'm out, and my uncle picks me up, and the first thing I say to him is, I'm not done drinking. I'm just gonna take a break. Like, hey, sweet man, like, good for you. You just went to rehab for 35 days, and you get out and you say that. So I get out. We end up having our son, and now having our son, it's not as magical as I wished it would have been, because all I could think was, I don't want him to be like me. I don't want him to be like me. He deserves better than this. He deserves better than this. And I'm like super happy that I had him because it probably saved my life. But it was a day that I should have been a lot happier than I was. Fast forward like a month, I start drinking again. Then I start going back down that slope. And in his 6 months of being born, my girlfriend had to make the tough choice of picking up and leaving because I wasn't a good environment to be around. I wasn't abusive or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I'd black out. I wasn't drinking every day at that point. I would drink on the weekends, but the problem was is I couldn't shut it off.
Yeah.
I binge drink, but it's I would black out and then just I would keep going, but I wouldn't remember, but I'd be coherent enough to go get more alcohol. And that's the scary part. And like I'd come to like 2 or 3 days later, like holy cow, right? So
Mm.
she left, and that was kind of one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with because only got to see my kid twice a week for 4 hours for the longest time. And
Wow.
when I'm at rock bottom, that's when I really started becoming suicidal and wanting to end it. There's a time where I woke up, I had blood in my bed, and my wrist was cut, and I had a bloody knife, and I don't remember doing that. I kind of, I
Wow.
kind of remember going to get the knife. I'm very lucky that nothing happened. I'm lucky that I woke up because, like I said, I don't remember doing it, but there's blood in my bed and my wrist was cut, and yeah, there's a bloody knife, and I really started to go downhill from there. I went back to work, and you know, they asked me to take. They finally said, "Hey," I took a couple of leaves, and I went back, and they're listen, we love you. You got to go get better. And they put me on a short-term leave. Luckily, it's a union job, so I got paid to go off, and they helped me find counselors.
Wow.
But you'd think when I have that kid that I'd be able to get better for him, but I couldn't. I like to tell people that you don't choose addiction. However, you choose to stay in addiction. The hardest part about addiction isn't quitting, but it's living in sobriety. So for me, living the sober life was the hardest. So learning how to have conversations, learning how to leave my house, learning how to play sports sober, not having that coping mechanism to
Yeah.
release the anxiety from me, right?
Wow.
So I remember one time my girlfriend or my ex dropped off my son, and he's 3 years old. And what does he want to do? Or he might have been two. Well, he wants to play with dad, right? He never gets to see dad. So when he gets to see me, like we're buddies, right? Um, he's all excited, he wants to play. And that day I couldn't keep it together. My thoughts were racing. I was getting angry, frustrated, sad, confused. Like, why do I feel like this? I have so much to offer people. And that's when I started to feel even more guilty that I have such good capabilities and so much to offer people. I shouldn't feel
Spirals,
like
right?
this. Yeah, I have no reason. I have
Yeah.
no reason to think the way I do upstairs. But I couldn't control those thoughts. So what did I do? I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I gotta distract him. So I took him to the store. I got a bag of candy and a bag of chips and brought him back home, and I put him in front of the TV. I put on a movie, gave him the candy and chips, and he got distracted. And as he was distracted, I walked behind him and I started staring in the back of his head, and I'm like, I started crying. I'm like, geez, am I gonna make it? Am I gonna make it to see him score his first goal? Am I gonna make it to teach him how to ride a bike, see him graduate, or even get married? And the inevitable answer was no, that I'm not going to make it. I didn't see myself in his future. And then, and I say that when I say that in my speech, I know people are probably thinking, well, why doesn't he do it for him? Right. And I'll tell you why. It's because I ended up in the hospital for the third time with alcohol poisoning, the second time in 3 weeks. And I had to get my stepdad to take me there. My hands were going numb. I couldn't keep water down. I'm puking. I'm pale. I'm pasty. I'm sweaty. I'm in the bed. I have IVs hooked in my arms, and my ex brings my son. Now, I'll never forget this. They walked in. He looks at me, looks at her, looks at me, looks at her again, says, "Mummy, what's wrong with daddy?" And as soon as he said that, I was like, man, this kid deserves a dad. He deserves a dad that's going to be there for him. He's going to teach him how to play hockey. He's going to, take him to school, be there to pick him up and teach him the ways of life, teach him how to be a man. And I couldn't see myself in his future. And then I started to think, you know what, my parents, if I do this, my family, they'll forgive me. They'll understand that they don't want to see me in pain. My ex, she's smart, she's beautiful, she's like the biggest heart I've ever seen. She'll find a good man for him. And as for my son, he's 2, 3 years old. He won't remember me. So I'm like, well, I should just end it. At one point I became an organ donor. I got milk thistle for my liver and kidney flush because I was preparing my body to give it away.
Wow.
Still remember walking in and the lady's like, well, thank you for becoming an organ donor. I'm just like, well, someone deserves them. And, but luckily, I started listening to motivational speaking. I tried to go to work out. Like I could go work out, put my headphones in, and I didn't really start working out until 28, 29 years old. But I was listening to motivational speaking, and I was very lucky to listen to guys I had no idea who they were. It was Trent Shelton, Inky Johnson, Les Brown, and Eric Thomas.
Love Les and I love Eric. I don't know the other two, but those boys are unbelievable.
You like Les and Eric? Oh man, you got to check out Trent Shelton. He's good. And Inky Johnson, he's incredible, man. He was on his way to the NFL. He got hit, and he had to take his arm off. They had to take his arm off because they ruptured something in his heart. And yeah, he was drafted in the NFL. Like he came out of the yeah, man. He came out of the ghetto basically, and now he's a speaker, a very accomplished one. And Trent Shelton's a very accomplished speaker now too, and he has a book called The Greatest You. But what all these guys talked about was finding your why. So I was like, okay, well, what is my why? I'm like, I started to look at my son. I'm like, well, maybe it's him. What if I get better for him? I know a lot of people are going to say, you got to do it for yourself. You got to do it for yourself. Well, I can tell you this, I couldn't. And I know a lot of people that couldn't. There was a lot of addicts that couldn't do it for themselves. A lot of guys that were there because their kids or their significant others, they wanted to get better for them. So, but by getting better for them, you actually get better for yourself.
Of course.
Right. So I'm like, if I get better for him, I get better for me. If I get better for me, I can actually help other people because I've always known that I have a big heart and I've always wanted to help other people, especially going through what I went through. But my problem is that when I'm going through that, I'm like, you deserve this. You deserve everything. Every choice you make, everything you do is a choice or decision that I made. I chose to drink. I chose to miss time with my son because of drinking, not go to work. I chose to do all those things. So that's my internal dialogue, which was beating myself up. So with that, I'm like, I found my why. And so my why was my son. So I made him my anchor. With that, I started to base my decisions around my why. So what do I got to do? Well, I got to stop drinking. I got to stop using drugs. Now I have the why. So I got to figure out the how, because the why is the belief, but the how is the action part. So now what do I got to do? Well, I got to go to rehab. So I went back to rehab again for the second time. But this time, instead of trying to quit drinking, I went with the power of why. So why do I drink? Well, it's because I have low self-confidence, low self-esteem, low self-worth. Now, why do I have that? Well, because I always compared myself to other people and I didn't really love myself. Now, why do you have that? Well, I didn't learn how to talk about it and how to really love myself. So what do I have to do? What is the how? Even more in depth. Well, I got to do gratitude. I started doing gratitude in the morning. I started, I know what are some things I'm grateful for. And I know it's a lot easier to say, just do gratitude. What are you grateful for? But you got to attach, if it's not working, attach a feeling to it. So that thing that you're grateful for, if it's not working, be like, okay, what if I didn't have that tomorrow? You got to attach that feeling. You got to make it a reality for you. So I started gratitude, right? And then I started doing positive affirmations, like I am statements, like, you know what? I am recovery. I am adversity. I am smart. I am loved. I matter, stuff like that. Then I started to journal at night. Journal my feelings. And the cool thing about the journal was that you could kind of see your growth, but you could also see your dark, dark times where a lot of it was like, I wish this person would just love me. But they actually did love me. It was me putting my perspective into their head because what I was projecting their thoughts, right? And people are like, oh, they're thinking this about me, but what they're really thinking is what you're thinking about them, right?
Yeah.
But what else did I do? I started exercising, eating healthier because, for me, since I quit drinking, I can sometimes still go on that like a little sugar rush, right? Because I crave that sugar, but I know if I glue that sugar, I feel guilt, I feel shame because I know I shouldn't. But also, your brain takes 25% of your glucose levels, your sugar levels, whatever you put in your body. So that stuff goes up to your brain, 25% whatever you're putting in there. So it messes with your mental health. So what else was I going to do? Well, I was going to build a support network of people that were going to build me up, encourage me, and give me an ear. So what else did I have to do? I've been to over 100 doctor's appointments, 77 days in rehab, 45 addiction appointments, 10 psychologists, 10 psychiatrists, and I've tried 8 different medications, from bipolar meds to antidepressants to anger management, sleeping pills, anxiety, ADHD. I did whatever I could to get better. I did a cognitive behavioral therapy course. And what else did I do? Oh, but the biggest thing, I was going to talk about it. If I'm down, you talk about it. And that's the hardest, that was the hardest one for me to do is, it's really hard for people to say, hey, you know what? I don't have it all together. But it shouldn't be, because like, you know what? When you look at a kid, they try so hard to get something. But finally they're like, I need some help. Or mommy, I'm sad. Right? They no fear to tell you how they're feeling. Right? And like, if I'm picking on my kid a little bit, he'll be like, Daddy, I don't like that. I'm like, okay. So that's what we have to do as adults. Yeah. We have to learn from our little ones.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Another thing, how do they learn from them? How they lift. They actually squat down and they lift with their legs. You know, all adults, they lift with they bend their back, they keep their legs straight, and then they have back problems.
Yeah.
So there's so much we can learn about kids, because when a kid goes into a friendship, you never see a judgment. Right? You never see judgment. They ask for help when they need it. They're very open with their feelings. And that's what I realized as adults, we have to do the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then with that, you know what? I came out of rehab. I was flying. 3 months sober. I hit the pink cloud. I went there. So in addiction, you can hit this thing called the pink cloud. And that's when so you hit it. And it's like, holy cow, this is real. Because for the 3 months, you have life by the horns. You come out, you're positive, you're doing your coping mechanism. But all of a sudden, you start to realize your friends are drinking. You're seeing it on TV. If you play sports, it's in every single sport. It's in commercials. It's if you go out for dinner. Alcohol is going to be everywhere. I have to continue my coping mechanisms, because if I don't, when you have mental health, so I was diagnosed with clinical depression, which is a sadness that lasts every day, sometimes all day, ADHD, social and general anxiety. I have had post-concussive syndrome, and you mix those with drugs and alcohol, it's a recipe for disaster. So I punished my brain. And, when you don't take care of it, you can quickly slide back down. And so addiction usually stems from something, from what's underneath that rock. So eventually on January 4th, I went and talked to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, you need to take me to the hospital. So she took me to the hospital, and with my mom in front of me, my dad to the left, and counselor to the right, I finally admitted out loud that I had a plan, and that plan was to end it. And from that day.
So this is 3 months after you've come out of rehab the second time.
Yes.
Right.
I hit the pink cloud and I went straight down again. Right. Because I realized that, holy cow, my life, you start thinking about, I can't drink forever, right? But when you should be drinking, or day by day, when you get out, it's day by day. It can be hour by hour. I'm like, well, is this me? Is this going to be me? I'm like, I was doing car salesman, and I hated it. I didn't, people will come in and they'd be like, okay, well, we only want to pay this. And I'm like, well, do you want to buy the car or not? And I didn't want to sit there and hang out with people. I'm like, is this going to be my life? And, I just kept going down the rabbit hole, and I had to hospitalize myself. And luckily, I was living with my mom's basement. So I hung out there for, 4 or 5 hours, and they let me go home with the counselor's card. And from that day, I started implementing all those strategies I talked about, listening to podcasts, of guys like me, manly men who talk about, it's okay. But the definition of man up is asking for help, taking responsibility for your decisions and choices you made. But then you got to ask for help, right? And, I committed to my medication. I committed to my counseling appointments, because I'd miss everyone. I'd miss one every now and then, thinking, it's where it comes to that acceptance piece that we were talking about before. So I have something called my 3 A's. Okay. So it's admit the problem. Whatever it is that you face, admit it. Then you have to accept it. So you have to accept it internally, that it is a truth for you and it's in your life. Then you got to ask for help. So I had to admit finally that, hey, Justin, you are depressed. Justin, you are an alcoholic, but I'm not going to let it define me. Then what I had to do, I had to accept it, that, hey, I need help for this, right? Yeah. Then I had to ask for help. And I did those steps. But my problem was I thought I accepted it. So the biggest one for me was the acceptance part. And it could be one of the three could be different for everybody, right? Because nobody's struggling the same. But for me, it was the acceptance parts. Because when I went 1, 2, 3 months sober, like, well, he can do it. Why can't I? So I'd have one drink, one turn to two, turn to two, three, into four, blackout, don't see my kid, don't go to work. Then once I started to feel better on my medications, well, I don't need you. I just started to feel better. Well, I don't need that counselor. So I had to, and I didn't realize this until I made a mental health presentation and I had those in there, that my acceptance part, I had to do it again. So I literally had to do the 4 A's, like admit, accept, ask for help, and then accept it again because, I shouldn't drink. I'll never say I can't drink because I can if I want, but I don't want to, and I shouldn't. Now, I couldn't do it alone. Now, for me, I'm not on medication right now. However, if I feel like I need to go back on medications, I will, because you don't have to take them for your whole life, and they are there for a reason. I know a lot of people, they bash medication. They're saying it's big pharmaceutical companies. Well, you know what? Think what you want, but those pharmaceutical companies, they helped me a ton.
Yeah,
they helped me get through what I was going through. So I had to. Big part for me was the acceptance piece. So
yeah.
when I tell people what my three main parts of my speech are, the 3 A's: find your why, figure out the how, and then your self-love, compassion, and your internal dialogue. Because you have to love yourself first. You gotta give yourself some grace to be a human and to feel, and especially other people as well, because you never know what their story is. And like when I took my kid to that store that one day, and nobody was mean to me, right? But what if somebody was? I could have snapped. So you got to be kind to everybody, because you just don't know what their story is.
Yeah.
And like when somebody's acting out, and what I learned in coaching was all behavior makes perfect sense. So there's a reason why someone's acting like that. So like, don't try to take it personally. But then it comes down to your internal dialogue. What you think, what you believe, and what you say to yourself can either make or break you, because the person you spend the most time with is yourself. And it all starts up here. It all starts with you, right? So, I had to make all those changes, and I came out on top. I was looking for it, but I don't know where it is. Oh, here, it's right here. So I am like 3 years later, I'm back together with the mother of my child. We have another kid on the way.
Congrats,
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. When I talked about seeing him score his first goal, I have this puck from his first goal. I actually coached him in hockey this year. He started hockey, baseball, and soccer, and I'm coaching him in all three. So I get to coach him. But I've done 2 coaching certifications, 2 speaking certifications. I've spoken in front of over 500 people, and then I've created a personal development program. And it was all because I finally started to commit and listen and talk about it.
Yeah. Wow. Unbelievable story, man. Unbelievable story. There's so much in that. There's so much. I mean, one of the things that I think is just amazing to me is obviously the journey and transformation that you went on. And I know we use those words so haphazard these days, but it truly is. That's an unbelievable transformation. I'm interested to know from your experience now on the other side of this, and obviously now as well, being a father of one and one on the way, if you can, just give everyone listening a bit of perspective in terms of, as somebody that's going through a difficult time. No doubt you had your partner, you had your family, you had your friends, and then obviously your work colleagues that all could see that you're going through some difficult times, right? And obviously maybe not as aware as what they should have been or could have been, right? But you get the idea. There are people trying to help. And I see, and we obviously speak to a lot of parents, right, with young kids and teenage kids that are going through difficult times, that are struggling with a lot of the same issues that you struggled with, maybe not to the same extent, but a lot of parents I speak to feel really powerless. That they go, I'm trying to help and I'm trying a lot of different things and nothing's really working. I'm not connecting. There is a nature of the beast, which is sometimes it just takes a bit of time, and that what you were doing wasn't necessarily wrong. But if it takes 6 months and you keep changing your strategy 10 times, you're not going to get there. So I'm interested to get your perspective on when you were going through that time, what support was really valuable that you didn't realize until perhaps afterwards? And if you were advising somebody to support somebody that's going through that difficult time, how would you encourage them to show up for them when they're terrified about losing their son or their daughter or whoever?
Yeah. So you know what? I actually I didn't want to talk about my suicidal thoughts because I was scared of losing my son.
Right.
But it's when I finally accepted that I needed the help, and
Right.
accepted that the help that I was getting, right?
Mm.
Um, so if when you're struggling, the best thing you can do is reach out, because for so many years I isolated. Like there would be times where I go 3 weeks of sitting in my room drinking by myself, like watching Grey's Anatomy for seasons on end, like because I'd watch that because I could see the happy endings. I needed to see the happy endings and like the pursuit of happiness, and then I would cry uncontrollably. And when you're going through something like this, it's really easy to lose hope. So as a friend or a parent looking in and trying to deal with someone like that, I had I had a friend who, he kind of, a couple friends gave up. They said, one said, if you don't go to work, don't talk to me. I was like, holy shit. Another one would get mad at me because I wouldn't text them back. So when I'm sitting there, upset, anxiety, depressed, and I don't feel like talking to someone, he's like, you kind of wrote me off. When you get a person like that, like, and I don't blame them. They didn't know how to deal with what I was going through, right? Because I took it personally, but then I'm like, you know what? They don't know what I was going through. But they cared, right? And they saw me for so many years destroy myself, and they just didn't know how to do it. But what I can say to people is, when a person's giving up on themselves, don't give up on them, because they need your hope, right? They're going to do a lot of things that you don't like, and they might hurt you, but that doesn't mean let them or anything. You might have to set a healthy boundary with them. I was very lucky my mom didn't kick me out of the house. I was this close to just being homeless. Like, I wanted to be homeless. I'm very happy I didn't, because I don't know where I would be. I almost just left, picked up, and didn't say anything. But when you give up on yourself, it's really hard to find the hope to get out of there. And I'd like to say to people is, just try not to give up on them.
Mm.
I know it's going to be tough, but if you have to make that healthy boundary, but the worst thing you can do is try to fix them. You give them options, like, hey, well, I got this number for you if you want to take it. Do you need to talk? Here, I got an ear for you.
Mm. Mm.
Right? And it's listening with intent to listen, not to fix.
How do you reconcile that for somebody though on the other side of that goes, well, obviously if you're an adult, right? So you're 20 something, 30 something living at home still, that's all good. But like if you're in your mom's position, it's like, well, you're living under my roof, I'm providing for you, and your energy has an impact, right? And maybe your decisions are having an impact as well. So, there's an element of, well, we want you to get better, but if you're not actively getting better and you're actually getting worse, and then we're copying it because you're getting worse, it's like, well, how do you engage in that dynamic and still be supportive and also still put up boundaries? I mean, that's obviously very nuanced, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I totally agree with that, because if it depends, like I was actively trying to get better. I was actually still paying rent.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause, I had a job for most of it, and then I was on short-term benefits. So I was very lucky to have that job I had, because it helped me get better and gave me counseling sessions.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like stealing from my parents or anything like that. I wasn't bringing parties over. So see, that's kind of like the gray area. I saw this judge speak one time about his son with addiction, and he's
Right.
like, you know what? I'd rather him die in my basement than die on the street.
Mm.
And that's a good. It's a different perspective to look at it, because as a parent, you're like, well, fuck, I'm just enabling him. Well, the truth is, he's going to do it wherever, whether it's inside or outside. As an addict, the one thing you can do is always get high or always get drunk. No matter what you have, you can figure it out somehow. Like, I remember getting alcohol with a gift card. Like, I could figure it out. But that being said, if, like I said, with the healthy boundaries, if that person is stealing from you, then you almost have no choice. So you might have to kick them out, right? But you know what? You can visit them, and if they don't accept it, well, try and visit them again. If they don't accept it, well, I mean, it's up to you how long you want to
Yeah.
be there for them, right?
Yeah.
But the only thing I can say is that, if they mean that much to you, you keep trying. But it's all let's see, That's the tricky part, man. That there's never going to be a right answer,
Yeah. I hear you.
because
I hear you.
there's going to be those kids that their parents will be like, "Okay, you're done," and then they're going to be like, "Click, okay, I'm going to get better."
Yeah.
For me, I kind of needed not tough love because I gave myself the tough love,
Yeah.
right? I almost took my life because I hated,
Yeah.
but my parents didn't give up on me. Right?
Yeah.
They gave me that place to stay because they could see I was actively trying to get better.
Yeah.
But that's the gray area, man. There's can
Yeah.
be no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
Some people need the tough love. Some people need the soft love. So it's, yeah, make that healthy boundary, and
Yeah.
it's don't take it personally, because I know my
Mm.
girlfriend, she really struggled with me picking alcohol over them,
Mm.
and till she's like, oh, I kind of get it now. But don't take it personally when someone's choosing the bottle or a drug, because it was for me. I told her, I'm like, this is a best friend to me. This is something that treats me good. I mean, I have bad consequences, but it makes me feel good. And when I blacked out for those 3 days, at least I didn't feel bad. At least I didn't know what I felt. Right.
Mm.
So when it comes to addiction, man, it's like I said, it's that gray area. It's you got to take it day by day. Are they actively trying to get help? Or and a lot of people, it's a lot harder to get help than people think. As a union guy, I got 5 counseling sessions, but then that's it. And the counselors wouldn't see me because I was going to an addiction counselor, but I wanted to see a counselor, but they wouldn't see me because they're like, oh, it's just the alcohol. I'm like, well, there's a reason why I'm drinking. It took me a while to get into rehab too. Like I couldn't just go into rehab. My parents wouldn't pay for my family couldn't afford to pay for a private one. Like people think it's like, oh, there's so much help out there. Well, there's not. If you don't have a computer, I mean, yeah, you can go to your local government work agency, but you gotta want to, right? And I can see a lot of people these days, like being homeless, and it's like, they it's it's easier to be homeless than it is to get help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it requires it. To be fair, it requires a lot of the services require initiative, or they require you to put yourself out there, or require you to actually step up, to face rejection, to confront a lot of those challenges as well. And not to say the people that are living in those conditions don't have that, but it's certainly it's a barrier, it's a friction point, right? It's like, people find it very difficult to do things that require that extra level of friction, and so you're always going to choose the path of least resistance, which
Yeah.
obviously means you continue on that same pattern, right?
Well, yeah, you live in your comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if the comfort zone is shit, it's still better than getting out of the comfort zone, which is worse.
Yeah, my addiction counselor, she even asked that. She's like, I would be in her office like shaking because I hadn't had a drink in a couple days or 3 days. She's like, do you like feeling like this? I'm like, you know what? Honestly, but for those 3 days I couldn't remember, best days I ever had.
Yeah.
And you'd pay the price.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I couldn't move. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't keep water in. I'd have to lay there like this. But I keep paying that price to feel better because I couldn't get it sober for the longest time. It's pretty crazy what an addict will put themselves through to feel a bit of release.
Yeah.
Peace.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. Wow. So for you, with what you're doing now as well, you do transformational coaching, you do speaking as well, obviously telling about your story as well. So tell everyone a little bit about what a day looks like for you these days, and how you're using that journey and that experience to be able to help change lives.
Well, today was quite the day. I mean, I got up, I walked my kid to the school, I went to the gym. Then June in Canada is for Canadian mental health. It's called Ride Don't Hide Month, where you raise money, you get out, go for a walk, garden, hike, bike, and they try to raise money for mental health. And from the gym, I went down to Canadian Mental Health. I rode a bike for a half an hour. From there, I went.
Yeah, I saw it on Instagram.
Yeah, then I went to work because I'm still a server part time.
Right.
Or I manage to at the restaurant until I get everything going, right? And one thing my coach said is like, don't quit your other job until you're 100% successful. So I have that job still. So I went from there to work, and then from work I went to, and I tried not to coach my kids soccer. So I go there in my dress pants and my collared shirt and my dress shoes. I get to my kids soccer. And what do I have to do? Their coach never shows up. So now I'm coaching soccer. From soccer, I came straight here. I had some sushi, some takeout sushi. No, some grocery store sushi. And now I have a podcast. Now after this podcast, I'm going to go put my kid to bed, maybe do a little bit of reading, go to bed.
Nice, brother.
That's, I still try to get my workouts in. I try to cut out caffeine completely.
Right.
Me and caffeine just don't mix. I just think it's not for me. I don't know if it's because I have ADHD, but caffeine makes me feel worse. But I'm trying to get my workouts in, limit my caffeine, try to get in my gratitude. One of the biggest things I want to do now, learn, is meditation. I've always had a bad relationship with meditation because of my ADHD. But what do you have to do? You got to start somewhere. So start with a minute, start with 2 minutes. It doesn't matter. Get into your mind, get into your head to get out of your head. Right now I have no clients currently. They all graduated. So I have a 12-week program where they work with me one-on-one. So I'd fit in clients coaching then. I did mental health presentations to a couple schools. I just did my first 45-minute alone keynote speech the other day.
Congratulations.
I've been getting on a lot of podcasts. So I'm trying to fit in everything. And all this is new to me. But, with the coaching, it's fun because you get to see people because it's 12 weeks. So you're with me for 12 weeks. I don't do one-on-one or just one session, one-offs or anything like that because I want people to really transform. But you get to see how they start and how they finish. Yeah. Some people make it at 6 weeks. Some people make it at 8. Some people finally have the kick in at like 11. But you get to see it. And we work on things like self-limiting beliefs, finding your why, passion, purpose, goals, habits. You get homework. You get an accountability sheet where you grade yourself on how you showed up that week. But the biggest thing I have at the end of each one of my modules, and I encourage people to do this, is what are 3 things you love about yourself? Because I guarantee you can say 3 things you love about your kid, 3 things you love about your spouse. Well, you probably say 3 things you love and 3 things that bother you.
Yeah.
But we won't talk about it. But it's very important it's very hard to say 3 things you love about yourself, right? And so I put that at the end of every module. It's really cool to see how people put different things, right? And they found they come up with at the end 36 different things that they love about themselves, which is really cool because it's really hard to sit there for one and write down 36 things you love about yourself. But if you do it over time, and then you start to see that, and that's where you fake it till you make it. Sometimes comes in. If you look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, if you don't love yourself, you just keep saying it over and over again. Well, there's a chance you could start to do it.
Yeah.
And start to see that person that's actually in there that you love.
Yeah. That's a beautiful finishing note for this conversation. And look, here's what I'd love for everyone that's listening. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're connecting in on the podcast, I'd love, if you can, chuck up 3 things as a comment under this episode, or even email me and Justin with 3 things that you're grateful for and 3 things you love about yourself. And I think if that's the only thing you take away from this, other than an incredible story, I think then that's been time well spent. Justin, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you sharing your story. I know there's so many of our audience that have either gone through what you're going through or are going through it, or have people that they know in their lives that are experiencing similar things. And so your story, just by simply the nature of you still being here, provides a sense of confidence and hope, and just a renewed sense of possibilities that the dark times don't always have to last. And you're a credit for hanging in there. And also as well, huge credit to stepping up. We talked about this before. Anyone can be a father. Well, half the population can be a father, but it takes something special to be a dad. And so, congratulations on getting back with your missus, and congratulations on the little one on the way as well. I wish you every success and every happiness as well. How can we find out more about you if we wanted to connect in? Where do we go?
Well, you can email me, justin@justinbryan.com. You can go to my website, www.justinbryan.com. My Instagram is just at JustinBryan19, or you can add me on Facebook, Justin Bryan. It's just a personal one that I turned into my business one. So basically what I do, I might put some photos of me and my family up there, but most of it is literally content, learning lessons. Like if people just went through and read it, you make a transformation in there.
Yeah, outstanding, brother. Well, I appreciate it so much. We'll chuck all of that up in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And for everyone that's listening at home, until we see you live or online, be bold, have fun, go make an impact in the world, and we'll see you on the wild side. Thank you so much, guys.